Last week, the Nigerian Downstream and Midstream Regulatory Petroleum Authority alleged that the Dangote Refinery is still at the pre-commissioning stage and has not been licensed. The Chief Executive Officer of the regulatory body, Farouk Ahmed, while speaking with journalists in Port Harcourt, also claimed that the Dangote Refinery only produces between 650 to 1,200 parts per million, and so their quality is much more inferior to imported quality. Well, on Saturday, the chairman of the Dangote Refinery, Aliko Dangote, refuted claims that the petroleum products from his refinery are substandard. Dangote made the remarks when members of the House of Representatives, led by the Speaker of the House, Tajuddin Abbas, visited the refinery in Lagos. Dangote said the regulatory agency accredited and approved the Dangote Refinery Laboratory in March 2024. A credibility analysis at the refinery's laboratory to access the quality of the diesel product revealed that the diesel sample, commonly known as AGO, measured 87.6 parts per million, contrary to the claims made by the regulatory authority. Tajuddin Abbas highlighted the need to investigate the contradictions.
President, I'm surprised that the regulatory agency has certified that what you are doing is acceptable, and it has met all the requirements. And based on what you said and what we have heard in the media, that NNPC is not happy with the quality of your product. So I don't know how we have these contradictory positions of true players all representing the public and the private sector. So I think it is something that we need to we're going to investigate further to find out whether there are ulterior motives or they are all stating their opinions professionally and objectively. Yes.
But the most important, Your Excellency, is to know that the imported one they are encouraging has failed in test. But in certificates, when you check, definitely, it will show this thing, because those people who have the lab, they've been asked what to write. But the best way to get is to go to filling stations and you buy. When you go to filling stations, you buy. Nobody can hide anything. And that is exactly what we did this morning on our way here, which was suggested by yourself, Your Excellency, and on to was taken from both the chairman of Downstream and also Midstream, and they brought the sample here. You can see that we are now at that is direct, so that we don't go and now give a different sample. It was taken directly from production. It's 87 ppm. If you are saying that, yes, how can Dangote alone supply the market? Okay, are you saying that the 4 billion the NMPC spent now on the activation of their own refineries, Kaduna, Warri, and Port Harcourt, is that money down the drain? Are the refineries not going to work? They have announced a date. So if they are there, we cannot be a monopoly because we are not the only ones. Actually, they are more powerful than us. So there's no way we can actually even be a monopoly. It's not done. I have seen also in the quality that they are talking about. Yes, when we started with about 600-700 ppm, which is true. That is where we started, because it was a new plant. We have not commissioned most of them. So by the time that we finish now, we have commissioned part of it. So I'm actually surprised for somebody to come and mention that, yes, we have a bad quality, we and the other modular refineries. I can't talk about the quality of the modular refineries, but our own today, like what I said, our own production, you have seen, we have tested it, is 87 ppm. And by the time you come, even on Monday, we'll be at 50. By beginning of August, end of this month, beginning of August, we'll be at 10 ppm. Okay? Our flash point, you've seen the tests that we have run, and Your Excellency, Sir, Honorable Speaker, Deputy Honorable Speaker, the leadership of the House, I want you to even at any time set up a committee that they will come with every representatives headed by your chosen honorable member to come and lead in taking samples from filling stations. Because I must tell you today that all the test certificates that people are busy, floating around, where are the labs? Even if they have the labs, I can tell you they are fake certificates. The real one that you now know that they are right is to take from the filling station and also to come and take also from our production line. Now you will be able to tell Nigerians that this is it. But the demarketing of a company by a regulator that he's supposed to protect is very, very unfortunate. It's good that we didn't even know that you are going to ask us to stop by the road and pick up diesel. And, we didn't know what you wanted to do. And when we got here, I said, okay, fine, let them go and, take sample. And the chairman Downstream of the House and the chairman Midstream of the House went with our people to pick up a hot sample. They brought, you've tested, and you've seen where we are. So we want to clear that, yes, we produce the best diesel in Nigeria. And if the regulator wants, he can come 24 hours anytime. He has people here. Let him conduct this. And I would like to also the media to show our lab, and I want them to also show the lab of the regulator himself. He should show us which lab is he using. Yes, because, as a regulator, he's supposed to have a lab. If a regulator doesn't have a lab, then we have an issue. He cannot rely on somebody. He's supposed to, check us.
Well, to shed more light on this matter, we're now being joined by economist Kevin Emmanuel, who had on X, formerly known as Twitter, addressed what he considers misrepresentations about the Dangote Refinery, including issues on certification and actual production capacity. Well, good morning, Emmanuel. Thank you very much for joining us on the morning show.
Morning.
I was hoping that you listened to...
good morning, OJ.
Thank you. I was hoping that you listened to the president of the Dangote group there, Aliko Dangote, refuting claims made by the regulatory body. They had claimed that, the Dangote Refinery is still at the pre-commissioning stage and that it's not being licensed at the point. But also yesterday, Dangote said that the refinery is fully ready and that in August, all the array of products except for petrochemicals will be available. And now, can you help us understand how this works? Looking at your tweet yesterday, you said that commercial refineries undergo 7 stages of pre-commissioning. So please walk us through what the process is to get certified.
Oji, thank you so much for having me, and very good morning to you and everyone this morning. I don't want to bore you with too much technical details, but before I start talking about the pre-commissioning stages and the technical capability tests that the NMDPRA as the regulator Midstream and Downstream does for a commercial refinery of that size, and it does for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 120 days, 180 days, 270, and then 360. At the end of 6 months, it gives you a provisional acceptance certificate, and then at the end of 12 months, it gives you a final acceptance certificate. Let me say that I am actually surprised that the NMDPRA chief still has a job. And I'll tell you why I said that. In February 2022, petrol was imported into Nigeria. Alhaji Aliko Dangote said that the regulator does not have his own lab that aligns with internal and third-party Robin Roundtable tests for motor octane number, research octane number, distillation level, sulfur content that tests for ash, and for density. And it's a shame because in 2022, petrol was actually imported into Nigeria that has such low research and motor octane level that it hit what they call the anti-knocking ratio. So many people's car engines were damaged, generator engines were damaged. There was no recompense, there was no investigation. The National Assembly did not call the regulator and ask them. They did not investigate facts. So the question is, Nigeria has been importing petrol and diesel and other petroleum products since 1972 for 52 years. Nigeria had refineries that had installed capacity of 210,000 barrels of crude oil processing per year. The last was completed in 1989 by British Petroleum and Shell. It's currently not operational. And in the last 20-something years, the government has spent 12 trillion in turnaround maintenance and is still dead. And in my opinion, I don't think those refineries should be relied on, by the way. So if, for example, an entrepreneur takes on the challenge of investing north of $20 billion to build a refinery, the government should support him. Now, let me come back. Refineries go through 7 stages of pre-commissioning because you have to test every single thing in the refinery. Now, for example, the reason why when they started refining diesel, the level of parts per million was anywhere around 650 to 1,002 was because what they call the crude oil distillation unit and the hydrotreater is not currently in operation. There are different stages of the refineries that has to go through tests. That's why you have NMDPRA officials there at the Dangote Refinery for the first 12 months. The officials are there to go through with the staffs of the refinery and the engineers to test every single part of it and ensure that they are working properly. So the fact that the hydrotreater does not come on, it means that they have to start refining from what they call lower or heavier distillates, like non-transportation fuels. You have your base oil, you have your petroleum coke that is used for making aluminum, you have your petrochemical feedstock, you have your bitumen binders. Those are your heavy distillates, and then you come to your middle distillates, and then you come to your higher distillates, right? And that's the reason why PMS is going to be one of the last set of derivatives of the 9 that will come into effect at the refinery. So I don't get the fuse, and I was a bit disappointed that the NMDPRA chief will say that Dangote wants to stop companies from importing petrol and diesel into Nigeria. Are we not supposed to stop importing petrol and diesel? Every month, Nigeria spends $2.4 billion to form its energy basket. 9 products, Jet A1, automotive gasoline oil, AGO, premium motor spirit, PMS, kerosene, lubricants, bitumen binders. 9 of them consumes $2.4 billion a month. So in a year, you spend north of anywhere around $26 billion importing petroleum products. If you have a refinery that has been built and can fully backwardly integrate us, and at full capacity utilization, we'll do 49.4 million liters of PMS on a daily basis. We'll do about 26 million liters of diesel on a daily basis. We'll do about 12 million liters of Jet A1 on a daily basis, about 1.1 million liters of kerosene on a daily basis, about 2.1 million liters of base oil that is used to produce lubricants that we use for our engines and all kinds of stuff. Why is the government not happy to supply Dangote with feedstock?
All right, Kevin, thanks for setting the tone for this conversation. I'd like you to take it a notch further. I like the way that you started in terms of the requirements for certification. Yes, you do not want to bore us with technicalities, but it will be important to break it down so that people who are watching will understand what is actually going on. Given that this is a project that the Nigerian government, through the NMPC, was meant to own a stake, paid some money, was meant to balance up. But then it looks like things are falling apart. Does this have to do with the deal with the federal government through the NMPC that seems to be in jeopardy, from 20% ownership now down to 7.9%, according to Dangote himself? Is what Farouk Ahmed is saying, is it coming on the basis of that failed, shall we say, transaction? In essence, does it mean that, do you think that the Dangote refinery constitutes a threat to vested interest?
I will say that the Dangote refinery is going to wipe off the importation business because the American Society for Testing and Materials, ASTM, now you have different kinds of tests in the midstream sector for refineries. You have European standards, EN228, you have ASTM, D4814, you have colonial tests, You have the Environmental Protection Agency test in America, then you have the American Petroleum Institute test. All these are standard tests that test for research octane number, motor octane number. It tests for distillation, for sulfur content, and for density. Now, you can see that the test that has been done at the lab of the Dangote Refinery produce his diesel at 87.6 parts per million. The test that was done for Total Energy's Downstream and Matrix Energy produced, Total produced about 1,827 parts per million diesel for imported diesel into Nigeria. And Matrix Energy produced about 2,254 parts per million for imported diesel into Nigeria. Okay? So his diesel is way, way, way better than what is imported into Nigeria. And if the National Assembly wants to go a step further, National Assembly can recruit SGS. SGS is one of the most reputable gasoline testing firm in the world. Recruit SGS and also recruit PwC or KPMG to come and do an audit of the third-party Robin Roundtable certification process for AGO and gasoline. Now, let's go back. In 2022, June 2022, NNPC went to Afrexim to do what they call reserve-based lending, and he set up an SPV called Lekki Refinery PLC, and he borrowed $1 billion, and he staked crude oil in 4 sale agreements, and it used that cash that was generated to invest in Dangote Refinery. Now, in that share purchase agreement, there was a specific timeline within which they were supposed to, pay the balance of that 20%, which was the total was $22.7 billion valuation for 20% stake in the refinery, Dangote Oil Refining Company. Now, that SPA was precedent on the refinery kicking off. It kicked off. They needed feedstock. NNPC did not pay up the feedstock. The feedstock of $1.7 billion in today's market translates to about 20.7 million barrels of crude oil. Now, why did NNPC not, why are they not able to pay up the feedstock? Between 2019 and 2024, NNPC has borrowed $12 billion through Afrexim, and they've staked about 250 million barrels of crude oil as collateral in reserve-based lending for that loan. The most recent of which was Project Gazelle, which was widely criticized, and where they exchanged 55,000 barrels of crude oil per day for $3.4 billion at about 11.85% interest, 6% SOFR, and then 5.85% country risk premium, and they're having to pay about 55,000 barrels of that at a strike price of $57 per barrel, NNPC cannot provide feedstock because before Dangote, they've been doing crude oil direct sale, direct purchase, where they exchange crude oil to companies who are appointed by NNPCL, including Duke Oil, that is now NNPC Trading, in exchange for PMS. And considering that PMS is only 43% derivative when you refine a barrel of crude oil, NNPC cannot pay Dangote the $1.7 billion because under the domestic crude oil supply obligations, crude oil is actually allocated at a discount, an official price that is a 27% discount to the open market rate. So these are the questions the National Assembly and the President needs to ask the NNPCL. Why were you not able to pay $1.7 billion in feedstock to complete the acquisition of 20% that will make you own fifth of the largest refinery in Africa and arguably the world, and that has a potential to produce north of $28 billion in revenue on a yearly basis? These are the questions that needs to be asked. This is the reason why when they reneged on the clauses of that share purchase agreement, the board of Dangote had to prevail to say that, okay, we're going to scale down your shares to the cash contribution you've paid for your equity to 7.2%.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, I want to ask you, because you said earlier that you were surprised that the boss of the regulatory authority still has a job. But I want to ask specifically about the sulfur levels that we're talking about here, and also the importance of the levels of sulfur in these derivative products. So, Mr. Dangote, the head of Dangote Refinery, did come out and say that his ppm measurement is now at 32, that he expects it to go even lower. But he's also said that they have tested products from from Total Station, from other stations, and that these levels are actually exceeding the levels that we should see in the market. He even asked the regulators to come and test his and to test what they're seeing on the market. But I want to know, what is the issue here with the sulfur levels, with the parts per million, with the flash point, and also what is the importance of it for Nigerians? Are we supposed to believe that some of the diesel or petrol products entering our vehicles or our cars or our machinery could actually be more harmful than we believe they are, both to ourselves and to the environment?
Well, and this is very important, and the reason why it's important is because if the president wants to fight climate change and cap carbon emissions and carbon control, the president needs to pay attention to the sulfur and the octane level of the PMS and AGO that is imported into Nigeria. You know, like I said earlier, the Total Energies Downstream diesel that is brought into Nigeria, test shows that it's at 1,827 parts per million. Matrix is above 2,200 parts per million. Dangote is currently at 87.6. So basically, the sulfur content talks about the ash that is generated, and that's what determines whether when the fuel to air combustion per stroke and compression stroke in your engine is generated as you move your vehicle, the smoke that comes out of your exhaust is white or black. You know, and this is the reason why high performance combustion engines, cars in Nigeria don't survive for very long because of the level of octane, which is very poor, and because of the level of sulfur, which is very high. And this is something Nigerians don't know. Okay, I'll give you an example. In Port Harcourt, the Rivers people complain a lot about black soot. And that black soot is basically because a lot of those illegal refineries and shanties in River States that where people refine the crude oil into AGO and kerosene and petrol that burns faster, they don't have chambers. They don't have crude oil distillation unit. They don't have hydrotreater that is able to treat and refine these products into globally accepted certified standards, right? And that's why you see a lot of soot, a lot of ash go into the atmosphere, and there's a lot of contamination. And to some point, these things are carcinogenic. You know, it also talks about the level of purity in the air. And it's also a reason why I tell people, when you're outside Nigeria, the air is purer and it's cleaner. And when you take pictures, the pictures are clearer. Because the level of carbon emission that comes from you having high sulfur content and low octane level for the PMS and AGO that is imported into Nigeria, that the regulator has failed to test because it doesn't have its own laboratory and it doesn't employ experts to test at the ports before they are put into storage depot and storage tanks and transported to different parts of Nigeria. It has impact on our environment.
You have highlighted a lot of points, which I think a lot of Nigerians will take. The fact that the regulatory authority has no laboratory to test these levels. I mean, you have, alluded to the fact that the reason why vehicles are not lasting very long is because of the level of octane and sulfur. And like you rightly said, Dangote had accused, these regulatory bodies of not passing these imported products. He says that they have failed, like you said. But I wanted to ask you about sabotage, because back in June, Dangote had accused or even, had suggested that the IOCs are refusing to supply his refinery with crude. And the CEO of the Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission, Gbenga Komolafe, had described the claim as erroneous. Would you describe this as sabotage at this point? Because it does appear that if the regulatory body is passing these imported crude as, safe, and they have no laboratory, what actually is really going on?
Well, I do not agree that the IOCs are to blame for the situation with the lack of feedstock. I think the blame points directly to NMDPRA and NNPCL, and the fact that a lot of Nigeria's crude oil has been negotiated in crude oil swap agreements for DSDP, now PPTA, or for sale agreement for reserve-backed loans that has been taken. And then domestic crude oil supply obligations to refineries that, in my opinion, are not in existence. But when you talk about this and you talk about upstream, and you talk about the fact that the last time there was final investment decision for any deep offshore project in Nigeria was in 2014. And the rig count in Nigeria is currently at 34, which is very low. And the fact that when you look at the sharing formula for production sharing contract or for joint venture agreement, unregistered joint venture agreements, deep offshore, where the IOCs are comfortable playing these days, you see Total last week sold the shares in its onshore business to Chapal Energies for $860 million US. The IOCs actually have what they call cost oil. They have 40%. Okay? So if the IOCs pay their royalty and tax oil to NNPC and they fulfill their domestic crude oil supply obligations in line with sections 109 of the PIA and as released by the Gazette of the NUPRC, the IOCs do not owe Dangote Refinery a right of first refusal for its feedstock, because every crude oil they get in Nigeria, less all the encumbrances and commitments they have based on the regulatory frameworks that are established, actually is exported in forward sale agreements that they already have with clients signed years ahead. And they also have, some of these companies have refineries. Shell has a refinery, ExxonMobil has a refinery. You know, so if they're not taking it, they are selling it through brokers to third parties. So it's normal for there to be a $2 to $4 or $5 commission spread for the brokers who trade. And this is not something that started last month or 1 year ago. It's something that's been in existence in the industry for a very long time. So I think we need to situate the blame where it belongs. And the blame belongs solely on the shoulders of NNPCL and NUPRC, not the IOCs.
All right, Kevin. Let me make this a combo. First is to ask what your thoughts are regarding what actually looks like a demarketing of a major project, possibly the biggest, single investment in Nigeria by an individual in recent times. And it looks to me like what the regulator, the head of the regulator is saying, amounts to demarketing. What are your views as to how this might affect, FDIs, given the fact that the plank that this current administration is resting on is to get as much FDIs as possible? The second part will be to play the devil's advocate for the regulator, and therefore to say that the questions that Farouk Ahmed is asking, are they legitimate questions, presented in the wrong way, but are they legitimate for Dangote Refinery management to answer, so that there can be full disclosure and there can be assurance to the Nigerian populace who are waiting eagerly, to see for the refinery to go full throttle?
So you can imagine the NNPCL, the international media is reporting that the NNPCL defaulted in a share purchase agreement to supply $1.7 billion worth of feedstock to Dangote that is signed in 2022. And the NNPCL did not think it wise to update the public, being that it's their commonwealth, that, look, we're unable to pay the feedstock. And why you're unable to pay the feedstock? And we lost out on 12.8% shareholding of Dangote Refinery, which is the single largest investment in Nigeria currently. And you can imagine the signal that sends, and the fact that the state-owned enterprise, the state oil company, is unable to meet up with its commitment. It's a very negative signal. And you can imagine that the NMDPRA chief will go further and say something like, Dangote wants us to give him the complete market. Why would somebody invest $20 billion if he doesn't want to capture the market? When BUA comes, BUA is attempting to build a 250,000 barrel capacity in Akwa Ibom. When he comes, maybe in 5 or 7 years' time, he's going to compete with Dangote. So it's only fair and it's reasonable. I think a lot of Nigerians are behind Dangote Refinery in the view that we should stop importing substandard diesel, substandard PMS. And you can see if the government or the public or any observer or stakeholder is doubting the test that was done at Dangote's laboratory in Ekpe, in Lekki, let them employ SGS and also employ an auditing firm to the third-party Robin Roundtable to test for research octane number, motor octane number, to test for sulfur content, to test for density, and to test for distillation levels. Let us see which one comes out better. The one that comes out better will determine if the government will make a decision to hand over the market to him, because he deserves it. He has earned it. He has been at it for 7 or 8 years. In 2007, by the way, Aliko formed a consortium called Blue Star to acquire Kaduna Refinery, and it was rejected. And that was the premise on which he started building this refinery, which is the most ambitious project Nigeria has seen until date. So it should be encouraged, because it's a signal to international investors, especially at the time when the government is trying to cut non-speculative foreign direct investors to bring in the institutional capital into Nigeria. On the other hand, about the claims of the chief of the NMDPRA, I don't think the claims are in order. The claims where he said that the level of sulfur content in his diesel is worse than what is being imported. Results show that that is not true. And like I said earlier, I've said it twice, I'm challenging the government to employ an independent gasoline testing agency, and also bring auditors, third-party auditors, to a third-party Robin Roundtable to do tests on samples taken from Dangote Refinery and the ones imported into Nigeria currently as storage depots. I don't think he has a claim.
Okay. Now, sorry, Mr. Emmanuel, I want to follow up here, and I really do want to follow up on the question that was just raised, particularly about the dangers of a monopoly. Now, the reason why governments prevent monopolies from thriving in economies is to protect the consumers, to protect the customers, actually to protect the end user, which is the Nigerian people. Now, you're saying that it is his right. I want you to clarify there. Do you believe that it is Dangote's right to monopolize the industry, or are you saying that regardless of his intentions or regardless of where the current space is right now, he has no competitors and therefore it is a natural monopoly? But if a regulator does come out and say they want to protect consumers from a monopoly, is that in and of itself, is that a bad thing?
I'll tell you what. Saudi Aramco owns a refinery in Texas, the United States, that has a daily production capacity, I think, refining capacity of anywhere around 400 to 450,000 barrels per day, if I'm not mistaken. I don't see the argument for a monopoly. And the reason is because, especially now that Dangote is having to import crude oil from the US, and now is going to import 11 million barrels from Petrobras in Brazil. He says that he's going to hit 550,000 barrels capacity utilization by September. I think it pays him better to actually import crude oil, refine his crude oil, and export it and sell in US dollar. He's going to make more money than to supply the Nigerian markets. Because if he has to supply the Nigerian markets and his unit cost per production is close to the current regulated price the government has set for these products, he's going to have to do a trade-off on having to do a net off and getting subsidy from the government, which doesn't make any sense for any businessman. So it pays him better to actually import crude oil, refine, and export his products back to off-takers. And you can see that they're already off-takers. I think he's been exporting urea to the US since 2021. Yeah? So I don't see the whole talk about monopoly, because he's the one that had the audacity to raise $20 billion to invest in the refinery, which is a very daring project and the single largest private sector investment we've had in Nigeria since independence. Nobody has done it. NMPC was unable to do it. NMPC has spent 12 trillion naira over the last 20 years plus trying to get 4 dead refineries back to operations, and till today is still promising next week, next month, next quarter, next year, and he's not been able to achieve it. So I don't see the talk about monopoly. BUA wants to come into play. The government should encourage BUA to come into play to build, commission, and compete with Dangote. Refineries are not $100 million investments or $50 million investments. They are huge capital projects. He had to dredge. Yeah, he had to create a port to dock what he brought in. He had to build roads. He had to build a power plant about 435 megawatts. He had to install industrial generators to build that plant and connect Shell gas feed from Escravos to be able to power that plant. Yeah, he's gone through a lot to get to where he is. So I think he should be encouraged. I think he should be designated as a critical national infrastructure and encouraged, because the amount of FX is going to save Nigeria and the amount of FX is going to supply to the market is going to also help our macroeconomic stability. And you can see that currently, the Central Bank of Nigeria currently has a net foreign exchange reserve position of anywhere less than $4 billion US. The gross that CBN keeps announcing is gross, is encumbered. The gross of $33 billion is encumbered. Yeah, that is not the true position of our foreign net foreign exchange reserves. Net foreign exchange reserves are low, so you need Dangote to sell and export these products to be able to supply to the autonomous foreign exchange markets and provide stability to the foreign exchange markets.
All right, Kevin, as we begin to wrap up, I just wanted to clarify that, the president of Dangote Group, Aliko Dangote, had, refuted that claim about monopoly yesterday when he met with the House of Representative members. And, he said, NNPC had said that by August, their refineries will be working. So he's never, tried to monopolize this market because he knows that the NNPC also will be back in the market. Will be back in August. Guess what they claim? That the Port Harcourt refinery will be back up and running. But before I let you go, I wanted to point out about, still on the levels of sulfur. Under the ECOWAS regulations, the proposed limit for the imported diesel is 50 ppm, correct? And then while for locally produced diesel from refineries within the ECOWAS region, the limit is set at 200 ppm. As we read yesterday, Dangote said that his levels are about 87 now at 36 ppm. So is it safe to say that the diesel from the Dangote refinery meets the standard?
Oji, it's a very ironical question because historically, since 1972 that we've been importing petroleum products, there is no single time in which the petroleum products imported into Nigeria for diesel, for the ppm, for the sulfur content and the octane level has met up with the ECOWAS framework that is set. This is the first time we're having an entrepreneur build a refinery that is bringing us close to having products that meets up with the regulatory standards and that can compete anywhere in the world. The petroleum products consumed in Nigeria will never be allowed to enter the European Union. Will never be allowed to enter the US markets. That is to show you how bad it is. And the fact that we've allowed this for years, cheap petrol, cheap diesel, that has contributed to the life cycle of engines and cars and the public health of Nigerians. And it points to the fact that the regulator has failed to do his job, which is to test these products at entry. Okay, so basically the refinery has what they call the hydrotreater. Is a distillation and cracking unit, yeah, that is going to further treat and refine the products to the specific levels. And it's promised. To be honest with you, I believe Aliko Dangote more than I believe NMPCL. And I'll say it. I have always said it, and I'll say it here for the world to hear. I believe Aliko Dangote more than I believe NMPCL. If he says he's going to get it to 10 ppm for sulfur content, and he's going to get your research octane level and motor octane level to 93 to 95 ppm, he's going to do it. NMPC has been promising turnaround maintenance for 4 dead refineries since forever, and they've not been able to pull it off. And they spent 12 trillion naira so far. So who should we believe? All right.
Well, all right. Well, Kevin, thank you very much for joining us on the program this morning and enlightening our viewers on the ongoings at the Dangote Refinery. Thank you so much indeed.